Hi, Deena Beard here. I'm going to talk a little bit about bridging. In mediated learning experience, we have to have three things. We have to have intentionality and reciprocity. We have to have bridging, and we have to have meaning or transcendence. Bridging is the idea that you link everything you learn to areas of your life. Not just one area, not just problem solving, but everything you can think of. Bridging needs to come from the person that you're working with. At the beginning, you're going to have to supply a lot of ideas for children to bridge to, especially if it's children. The older someone is, the more life experiences they have, the more things, hobbies, ideas, work, career paths, everything they have at their disposal to think of. So the older your client, the more rich your bridging can be. But even with young children, bridging is very, very necessary. Remember, it's linking or bridging from what they learn now to parts of their life. Now, we talk about bridging strategies. We are bridging strategies. We're also bridging problem solving, which is a strategy, I know, but we're getting specific. We're bridging conditions on the page. We're bridging conditions of learning. We're bridging everything we can think of. When we form principles, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, or rules for living, they're made because we have bridged to everything that we can think of and everything that they can think of, our clients, whether they're little kids or older students. Also remember that if you are bridging with one person, you have only your experience and their experience to bridge to and from. If you have a small group or even a classroom, don't be intimidated by that idea of bridging. Remember that the more people you have, the more collective experience you have, the more collective ideas you have, and the more unique ways people can bridge. We're going to explore some of those now. Earlier, we talked about bridging being a core concept of the mediated learning experience. I want to explore that just a little bit more. Bridging, what is it? It's linking a learned strategy to many areas of life, making many, many connections, as many as you possibly can. The process in mediated learning experience is that we have a problem, maybe from a page, probably, page 1 of dots, how to find a square. Any of the pages that we have a problem. We form a specific strategy to solve that problem. Then we link it to life. Here's where we're going to be spending most of the time today on thinking about how to do that. After you link it to life, you take that specific strategy and try to generalize it. You make it into a strategy that applies to all of the examples that you've come up with. And then finally you form a principle or a rule for life. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that right now. You'll learn more about that later. Right now, I want to talk about how do you link to life. You need to have many, many ideas about how to do that. And I think the best way is to have categories. Be good at categorization. And since this is a mental process, you have to have a mental process for categorizing. I'm going to take the strategy of making a plan and just kind of go through. You make a plan, say, to find the square first. When you make a plan as a strategy, you are battling impulsivity, and then you're also strengthening the cognitive function of planning. So making a plan is the strategy. The cognitive function that you're elevating or strengthening is planning, and what you're battling is the dysfunction of impulsivity. When you decide to make a plan for finding the square first, and maybe you look for on the page of dots, and you look for 4 dots, or you look for your cues, or whatever it is that you do, how do you jump from that to categories? What do you say? First, you need to just ask the kids, is there any other place in your life that you make a plan? When else do you make a plan? And then give some wait time. Don't have a bunch of things ready to say yet. Give them some time to come up with it. If you're working with one student, you may have to step in pretty quickly with some ideas, examples, personal experiences of making a plan. If you are working with a large classroom, then probably someone will have some thoughts that you can jump off of, and others will jump on board, and you'll have many, many examples before you know it. But what if you have the silent classroom? What if it's very awkward? Nobody wants to say anything. It's up to you to have plenty of examples to give them to make connections, to link to their life about making a plan or whatever strategy you use. So I think in terms of categories, I think, of course, academics. We all know that when we're working with students, we're enhancing their academic performance if at all possible. But you need to get specific. What subject are you talking about? When kids say math, you say, well, how do you make a plan in math? Tell me about that and explore that idea. You may be talking about studying. You can talk about testing. But I'm going to say that academics is not really where kids are the most interested. Where you will hook them is if you can think and help them recall areas of their life that they're very interested in. So you may have to ask general questions like, what do you do for fun? What are you interested in? What sports do you like? What about music? What kind of music do you like? And then when somebody says, yeah, I do, well, what do you listen to? And maybe they tell you that they listen to a rock group or a certain kind of music. And you say, well, how on earth can you make a plan to listen well to that music? Or maybe they play an instrument. So you can say, how do you make a plan to practice piano? Or how do you make a plan to perform in the band? Does your band leader have a plan? You are linking the idea of this strategy of making a plan to music. It could be listening to music, selecting music, performing music, playing an instrument, sports. Think about how many kids, most of our kids these days, are involved in something: basketball, football, tennis. Of course, you can think of many, swimming. Think of as many in that category as you can. When you talk about sports, I think the hard part is actually getting from making a plan to how do you make a plan in football? Well, ask the question and then be quiet. Give them time to think of it. And actually, we know that in football, if you're playing organized sports, they have playbooks, they have coding for certain plays, they have plays for different members of the team. So the same is true for basketball, baseball, football, all of those sports. Not to mention swimming at a competition level. Get to that. You can talk about fashion. I always like to talk about what kids are doing with their time. What do you do when you're not in school? A lot of kids say playing videos. You should know some of the videos that kids play. You should know the titles even if you don't know what they're about. Find out what kids are interested in. It's not a bad idea. You don't have to do these things, but if you really want to make a child more modifiable and help them link strategies to life, you need to be able to nod your head or to say a word about something that they're very interested in. You can talk about church. You can talk about friendships. When we talk about making a plan and friendships, I like to even ask kids, do you have a plan in place for when you're with your friends at the mall and they want you to do something that you're not supposed to do? Can you make a plan for that? And then give them time. And you'll see a lot of glances at each other. Can we really do that? Well, you can. And then if you want to be excluded from that having to do something, if you've got something ready to say, it works. It's very hard when we all know this, when we're in front of people and they're trying to talk you into something and you can't think of a reason or anything to respond. Making a plan for peer pressure is really, really good. It will help your kids. You can talk about books. You can talk about quotes. I like to spend time even on videos, commercials, movies, clips, people that have done things that are in the news. You can talk about, did they have a plan? What was it? Was it effective? How could it have been better? Another important thing I keep in my head is time, past, present, and future. Did I make a plan when I was 5 years old? Do I make plans now? How will my plans be different in my future? How are my plans different with my own children now than with my grandchildren? When you talk about family, you can also help really push the transmission of each individual family culture. I encourage you to get stories from kids, have them go home and find out when their parents ever made a plan for anything. It could be something as easy as a vacation. It could be life change. It could be grandparents who moved to the United States from somewhere else. It could be a big plan like that, or it could be small plans. How do you get together for Christmas? Which grandparents' house are we going to? But I really like to have my students and the people I work with have some knowledge about the family stories that are important in their families. In this way, they begin to really embrace their own heritage. They embrace and strengthen their own modifiability by being able to consider what their parents did, knowing that they're very secure in what their parents did and how they support them and the decisions they made, and now understanding that they're carrying on their family by what they do and how they do it. You can consider pieces of work that they're doing in their classrooms, but be specific. When you talk about reading, what story are you reading right now? You need to have a lot of knowledge about what is going on in your schools, what the literature is like right now, what math problems they're working on, even if it's as broad as just fractions or as broad as we're working on percents, and you have an idea about, if they need to know how to make a plan to work a percentage problem out, it's not a bad idea for you to know something about that. Have many, many things. The idea is that when you're working on a page, you have the problem, you state what it is, you form a specific strategy to solve the problem, you link it to life. Here's where you have many, many categories. You could do geology, space. There's just so many categories that you want to start forming in your head, and plants, animals. There's a world of categories that you can acquire, and the more you do it, the more you practice, the more you ask those questions. How can you link making a plan to your life? And listen to what they say and remember it. You will gradually and sometimes quickly build a very big bank of categorized subjects that you can bridge to in a very effective manner. After they link it to the life, and you've got many, many examples, you take that specific strategy, making a plan, and you develop it into not just a plan for finding the square, but when is it important to make a plan? We've gone through this. Is it important to make a plan when you're studying for a test? Is it important to have a plan when you're collecting stories from your family or from your grandparents? And then forming the principle is going to directly relate to all of these things that you've already done. So bridging is fun. You'll enjoy it. Just make yourself ask those questions. Give plenty of wait time. Assure the kids that their bridging is very valid, and good things will happen. Thanks for listening.